What is a part of history that we consider to be a fact is 100% fake. That Hitler was a raging, shouting maniac in person. I think we want to believe that he would be that way because the idea that someone who was polite and low-key could be so evil is really disturbing. According to his personal secretary and many people who knew him, Hitler rarely showed anger and was subdued but friendly in private. Traudl Junge was there during the incident that inspired the scene in the movie Downfall that became a meme, and she said that she was completely shocked to hear Hitler raise his voice. She had worked for him for over 2 years. Einstein never failed math. The rumor started from Ripley's Believe It or Not, and Einstein actually responded to them saying, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15 I had mastered differential and integral calculus." He wasn't very good at the non-science related classes though, and did fail French. There is a joke saying that Austria's greatest success is making everyone believe that Mozart was Austrian and Hitler was German. Wasn't Mozart from Salzburg? Yes. The statement is normally said about Beethoven, who spent most of his career living in Vienna, but was born in Bonn. I haven't seen this on here yet, but no one in the town of Salem was actually burned at the stake during the witch trials. Most of them were hung, with one being crushed under rocks. But with most of the kids in school now reading The Crucible, I think this'll start being more well known. Carrots are good for eye health, but won't improve your eyesight. Nevertheless, people have been telling me all my life I should eat carrots to see better. The reason people think that is during WW2 the Royal Air Force had this new radar system and they didn't want the Germans to know about it, so they spread the rumor that the reason their pilots could find their planes so fast was that they ate carrots. Carrots are good for your eyes. Ever seen a rabbit with glasses? Okay. This is double funny in this thread because the only reason people think rabbits regularly eat carrots is due to Bugs Bunny cartoons. Whatever the fuck is on the History Channel nowadays. It ain't even historical anymore. They should rename it as the Whatever We Feel Like It channel. The Boston Tea Party didn't have some grand celebration. A lot of the colonists were confused and it's recorded as one of Boston's most quiet nights. There were so many loyalists throughout the American Revolution. The Sons of Liberty were a small group of complete radicals that roped the entirety of colonial America, for lack of a better term, into a war that many of them did not really support. One from America would be that the famous Johnny Appleseed, out of the goodness of his heart, walked across much of the USA, and even a bit into Canada, planting apple orchards to provide the locals with healthy apples. In reality, he was an eccentric who had financial means and was a shrewd businessman. Yes, he did, in fact, walk around barefoot with a cooking pot on his head. That much is true. Johnny Appleseed, known as John Chapman to his mother, was planting orchards in areas he believed people would soon move as westward expansion grew across the Midwestern U.S. But the apples he planted were crap. They were used to make cider and only to make cider. They were sour and not edible. People eventually moved to those lands, as he predicted, and he paid them to look after his orchards and harvest the apples he sold to breweries. A lot of people think the whole women and children first was a standard belief in the past, but, as even I've learned recently, that happening during the Titanic and Birkenhead were anomalies. It's not maritime law or common practice. Ninjas dressed in all black to stay stealthy in the night, or something like that. Ninjas dress like normal people to blend in. The all-black look stemmed from Japanese theater to make it more obvious to the audience who the ninjas were. If they wore all black it'd be quite obvious, and they'd stick out like a sore thumb. That the Founding Fathers is a meaningful, coherent group of timeless sages rather than a collection of politicians who acted for political reasons and disagreed with one another. Some people who are technically Founding Fathers are obscure nobodies. Who the hell cares about Button Gwinnett? There was great diversity of thought at the Constitutional Convention. James Madison considered the equal apportionment of the United States Senate to be a defeat. James Wilson has been relegated to obscurity, but was among the most learned and respected members of the convention who in exasperation asked, "Can we forget for whom we are forming a government? Is it for man, or for the imaginary beings called states?" A great deal of popular conception of the founding, and those who did it, is rooted in misconception, or outright falsehoods. That when Europeans first arrived on the east coast of what is now the US, the land was very sparsely populated, and so there was a lot of free land to settle. At least that's what I've been taught in school. In reality, it turns out the coast was densely populated with native settlements, to the point where Europeans couldn't even disembark because the natives wouldn't allow them. They would keep them at the bay just to trade and then force them to turn back. It wasn't until European diseases spread through the continent that 95% of the indigenous population died, and that's when the first colonies began in the US. So that's why we now have the misconception of there always having been lots of open land. In general, there are tons of misconceptions about Native Americans and colonial history. I recommend the book 1491 by Charles C. Mann, which clears up a lot of these misconceptions. It's where I got the above information from as well. Not fake, but the Boston Massacre was not. Evil redcoats shooting peaceful American protesters. That protest was anything but peaceful. It was basically a riot. They were throwing rocks and other objects at the redcoats, trying to goad them into something. The soldiers probably had orders not to shoot, but they were outnumbered and scared, so finally they fired. They were arrested and tried. John Adams, the future second president, defended them in court. And won! That after the first failed assassination attempt, Gavrilo Princip went to eat a sandwich at a cafe and Archduke Franz Ferdinand just happened to stop right in front of him. This is partially true. Ferdinand's driver really did make a wrong turn at exactly the wrong place, and Princip did get pretty lucky, but he hadn't just given up. The reason for the driver's confusion was that he didn't know he was supposed to continue along the Appel Quay to go to the hospital, and instead followed the original, published, route. Princip had gone there not to eat at the delicatessen, but out of hope that Ferdinand would come that way. Princip was given a full trial, with multiple witnesses. Nobody ever said anything about him eating anything, much less a sandwich, which would have been extremely uncommon in Serbia at the time. The myth likely originates from, of all things, a Brazilian novel about a 12-fingered assassin translated into English and published in the UK and US in 2001. There is no known account of the myth which predates this. The drought that preceded the 1930s Dust Bowl was entirely to blame. Actually, it was the fault of the farmers, struggling with the Great Depression, who were trying to increase their crop yields by replanting mature crops into the deeper soil, then planting younger crops on top. The soil turned to dust because the crops sucked out all of the soil's nutrients faster than it could be replenished, even with fertilizers. Had there been normal rainfall, the soil would have lasted 1 year, maybe 2. The drought just made the Dust Bowl happen sooner, but it was going to happen anyway because of poor farming practices.